Good evening. So, the other day I was watching Brian Sullivan, also known as Duke, World Bigfoot Central, World Bigfoot Radio, and I was watching an episode with him. I believe it was episodes 72 and 73, and they were talking about very fascinating stuff, biblical history, going pre-Bible, pre-Adamite, talking about all the strange creatures that have evolved through history, and the Anunnaki, and the Nephilim, and the Raphaim, and all those crazy, strange things. And Brian, Duke, as he likes to be called, mentioned something just kind of off the cuff, and he flashed it up for a second. And I was like, whoa, back to train up here. And he was talking about St. Christopher. And he was talking about St. Christopher, the Dogman saint. And I was like, the what and the who now? And as I started looking into it, I thought I'd maybe heard of it vaguely before. Now, why this is so fascinating is all throughout North America, all the way down to the southern border, all the way up through northern and central part of the United States, people see these dog creatures. Now, for all the new people, as fantastical as it may seem, as out there as it may be, and as werewolf-like, although these seem to be a race of creatures people report that are always a dog as opposed to a werewolf that is a human that transforms. You know, you look at the Michigan Dogman and the Beast of Bray Road, and there's a real history here in the United States. A lot of Native American tribes going back describe these creatures. And as strange as it is if you think Bigfoot, yeah, okay, maybe there's a chance for Bigfoot, then you talk about this Dogman creature and you think that's completely out the window, that's completely strange, or I don't buy that. I'm with you. I hear you. I get it. Trust me. But people report these things. I'm actually working on a Dogman case right now in Los Angeles County, but we'll get into that in another video. But as fantastical as it is, especially all through the South, the tales of like the Rougarou and stuff like that, people report these Dogman creatures. And we're going to jump into it today, talk a little bit about St. Christopher. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the historical background and why there might be something more to this than just crazy people, hallucination, people who watched Van Helsing too many times, people who are out there, or people who are just mistaking large dogs, that there's really a phenomenon, and maybe there might be a historical background for it. So with St. Christopher, there's a lot of debate whether he really existed or not. And the name Christopher, meaning Christ bearer, because the story or legend or however you want to look at it goes is that he was a traveler, lone traveler, and the small child who was Jesus at the time needed help across the river, and he picked him up and carried him. He didn't know it was Christ. He was just a kind traveler who helped a little kid cross the river. And when he got to the other side, he revealed himself to be Christ, and that's kind of how the story goes. And there's a lot of debate whether he really existed, if this is a real story, or if there's a fable. There's a lot of saints in the Catholic religion where they have real documentation of a real person, performing miracles. He got to perform a couple miracles, I think, to become a saint. And there's like canonization, and there's a couple steps to being a saint. And so yeah, that's why he's the patron saint of travelers and also the patron saint of dogs. And most modern depictions of St. Christopher, you will not see any reference to him being a dog or a dog man. And you got to remember the Renaissance, when a lot of art was produced, and the 300 or 400 years ago, when you see a lot of frescoes and artwork and religious type stuff, they were probably a lot like if someone was going to try to paint him now. Like, well, what do you mean he had a dog head? Well, that's just got to be a metaphor. We're not going to paint him with a dog head. He was a real person. Or, they don't exist, or that, dog men or werewolves having kind of an evil connotation, and this being a kind traveler who apparently helped Christ across the river. They obviously wouldn't include that. So here's a full, slow view of the picture of St. Christopher as a dogman. And there's quite a few artistic interpretations of St. Christopher as having a dog head. And the article I linked below was quite interesting. There's multiple parts. It's very long, but quite fascinating. It tells you about a lot of the metaphor of, dogs being lowly creatures, them being scavengers, being unclean, kind of like how we would modern day, oh, like you pig or you're a dog, that kind of a thing. Today we look at dogs quite friendly, but back then it had a much different connotation because people, lived a lot dirtier lifestyle and were a lot more connected to the earth and didn't bathe, and rodents and lice and all that stuff were a problem. So, comparing somebody to a dog was, meant to be kind of an insult, or you lowly dog. And they think that maybe St. Christopher being a traveler, kind of a beggar, a poor man kind of a thing, being a lowly creature, a lowly person, yet he was still able to help Christ cross the river. And that's why they describe him as being a dog. In the picture we showed earlier, and here you can see even on Amazon, they show depictions of him being the patron saint of dogs, being a traveler. So it's quite interesting. In some areas, they really kind of embrace the idea of St. Christopher having a dog head, and in other times they really just kind of completely ignore it, and they just kind of give him a generic appearance, typical, fresco look with a guy with a beard and curly hair helping young baby Jesus across the river. But when you look at other stories, when you hear, contemporary times around close to 2,000 years ago and later, and then earlier still, there's a lot of stories of dog-headed men. And it really starts to make you think maybe there's a little bit more to this, like stories of knights, of the original Knights Templars, that there was a division or groups of them that had dogs' heads. There are other stories, if you think about ancient Egypt and Anubis, which we're going to show a little bit here, that was a dog-headed man of the underworld. And when you think about all the different chimeras and the Raphaim and the Nephilim, and stories of like minotaurs and centaurs and lion men and dragon men and lizard men, and going all through these cultures, it's like, well, there are a lot of strange things in antiquity. Is it just because they were bored? Was it because people use this as like a representation of their family and their house, like a sigil? Or were there real creatures that people still see to this day in the woods and in odd places and in caves and in underground that, you see it, you don't want to tell anybody because you don't want to be ridiculed. And but you saw it, you saw it, and there's a lot of other people like you. This is a very interesting one because you see all the saints there, normal looking hands, normal looking faces. And then down below, you can see the guy on the left looks kind of like some kind of humanoid, almost. He doesn't look like a normal human, and he's got longer hands, almost like kind of like a golem-like creature. And then the guy on the right, he's got longer hands and almost kind of claws, bigger hands, and he's got a dog's head there too. And, could it be St. Christopher, kind of one of the lower saints, or a depiction of it? But it's quite fascinating when you zoom in on that, and you're like, well, that guy's definitely got a dog head. And while you see all the normal looking saintly creatures, and you're like, well, who are these two guys down here ushering in the door, looking up in reverence? And it's also kind of contradictory because if you think about Dogman serving in a Knights Templar as one being a Catholic saint, like I said, although most interpretations, they don't talk about him that way. And you think about modern day dogmen and werewolves as being inherently evil, and and the whole drinking blood and transforming things and sacrifice. And then you have on the other end of it, it's like, well, one's a Catholic saint, and they talk about him being in a Knights Templar, and it's really quite odd that that we find this historically. So one of the most famous, I think, most people will recognize, and we're talking a culture that goes back thousands of years before even St. Christopher was depicted, was the Greek god Anubis. And he was a god of the underworld. He had the head of a dog, or a jackal, which is a canine species. And he would usher in the souls, and he was in charge of the afterlife, essentially. I think I got that right. But if you look historically to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, and going way, way back in antiquity, I mean, even before the ancient Egyptians, some of the very first civilizations, and if you look at the timeline in the Bible, we're talking some of these are even like pre-flood. Some of these might even be like pre-Adamites, which if you look at, there's a lot of interpretation of the Bible that, God created Eve for Adam because, he didn't have a suitable mate for him, and that maybe that there were other things around. But that's a whole nother topic of discussion and getting off into weeds. But it seems like all these ancient cultures have so many different depictions of these strange creatures, dog-headed men and minotaurs and all that other stuff like we were talking about. And it kind of puts it a little bit for me into a modern perspective. If thousands of years, every kind of ancient civilization, every kind of tribe from Native Americans to South Americans to medieval Europe to ancient Greece and ancient, the cradle of civilization, all through Africa and Asia even, all these different strange creatures. And in the last couple hundred years, we decided that they're all myth and they don't exist. But to this day, people are still seeing things and finding evidence like you see here of things that don't make sense. It kind of just puts it in a little bit of perspective that maybe there's more to this than what's going on. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching today. I found the whole concept of St. Christopher as the Dogman saint or the dog-headed saint as really interesting and wanted to share it with you guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And please hit the subscribe and hit that notification button. It really helps this channel grow. Thank you very much, and stay safe in the woods.